He is currently rotting in an orange jumpsuit on a cold prison floor. My former best friend is begging for spare change on a dusty sidewalk. And me. I just won Entrepreneur of the Year. I did not just break their hearts. I deleted their entire existence. My husband called me a naive cash cow. He spent 2 years laughing in the house I bought. He was busy planning to kick me to the curb. He thought he was playing a game with a weak woman. He was wrong while they were celebrating a secret pregnancy. I was busy setting a digital trap. I am the CEO of this empire for a reason. I track every cent. I record every lie. And I was waiting for the perfect moment to pull the trigger. This is not a story about a broken heart. This is a masterclass in strategic destruction. Watch until the end to see how I turned a millionaire into a construction laborer. The game of chess starts now. Trust is an expensive investment. I spent 5 years pouring everything into Galani. I gave him my name. I gave him my capital. I gave him the keys to my empire. But that morning, the silence in our Buckhead estate felt different. It was too quiet. The air was stagnant. Galani had just left for Charlotte. He said it was an urgent meeting. He said he wanted to prove himself to my father. He looked me in the eyes. He smiled that perfect smile. The one that used to make my heart skip a beat. Now it just made my skin crawl. I stood in our master bedroom. The scent of his expensive cologne still hung in the air. It was a woody scent, masculine, sharp. My money had bought that bottle. I walked to the large mahogany mirror. I looked at myself. Kamari Okoro, the woman who built a tech firm from the ground up. I noticed a small notification on my phone. A transaction alert. $10,000. Withdrawn from the company operations account. The location. A high-end boutique in Savannah. My heart did not race. It froze. Charlotte was north. Savannah was south. Galani was moving in the wrong direction. A businessman does not make a mistake like that. A husband does not withdraw $10,000 for a client meeting. I sat on the edge of our king-size bed. The silk sheets felt cold against my skin. I began to think like a CEO, not a wife. In business, numbers never lie. People do. I pulled up the GPS log for the Cadillac Escalade. I had installed it for security. But today, it was for clarity. The little blue dot was not in Charlotte. It was parked at St. Jude's Private Hospital. In Savannah. My mind shifted to Namira, my best friend. My sister. She had texted me yesterday. She said she was dying of typhoid. She said she was alone. She lived in a townhouse I provided for free. I had been worried. I'd been losing sleep over her health. I picked up my phone. I dialed her number. It rang 3 times. Then it went to voicemail. I checked the banking logs again. $10,000 gone. That was the mistake. Galani was arrogant. He thought I was too busy with the board of directors to notice a single withdrawal. He thought love had made me soft. He thought the shadow of my family name blinded me. He was wrong. I stood up. I did not cry. Tears are for the weak. I applied my deep red lipstick. It felt like war paint. I walked down to the garage. My red Tesla was waiting. It was silent, powerful, just like me. I did not call Malik my driver. I needed to do this alone. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. I started the engine. The hum of the electric motor was barely audible. I drove out of the Buckhead gates. The sun was gray. The Georgia sky was heavy with clouds. The drive to Savannah is usually 4 hours. I did it in 3. I stayed on Highway 16. The pine trees blurred past me. I kept my hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. My grip was tight. My knuckles were white. I replayed every memory of Namira. We met at Howard University. We shared secrets. We shared dreams. I helped her when she was broke. I gave her a job. I gave her a home. I thought she was my anchor. I did not realize she was a shark. The heat of the Georgia afternoon began to seep through the windows. I turned the AC to the maximum. The cold air hit my face. It felt like needles. My mind was calculating. $10,000. That is not just a gift. That is a commitment. That is a life being built on my tab. I arrived in Savannah at exactly 5 in the evening. The city was humid. The smell of salt and old moss filled the air. I pulled into the parking lot of St. Jude's. It was an elite hospital. Marble floors. Golden light. It did not smell like a hospital. It smelled like money. I stepped out of the car. The pavement was hot. I could feel the heat through the soles of my heels. I carried a large basket of fruit. It was my cover story. I was the concerned friend. I was the grieving wife. I walked toward the entrance. The automatic doors slid open. The lobby was quiet. I walked to the reception desk. The clerk looked up. She saw my suit. She saw my jewelry. She treated me with instant respect. I asked for Namira Vance, room 305 VIP wing. The clerk smiled. She told me the patient was resting. She said the husband was already there. Husband, that word felt like a physical blow. I nodded. I thanked her. I walked toward the elevator. The elevator ride felt like an eternity. The mirrored wall showed a woman who looked composed. But inside, a storm was brewing. The doors opened on the 3rd floor. The hallway was carpeted. My steps were silent. I walked past rooms filled with flowers. I reached the end of the hall. Room 35. The door was slightly open. Just a crack. I stopped. I held my breath. The air in the hallway felt thin. I could hear a voice. It was deep. It was smooth. It was the voice that whispered, "I love you every morning." Glani. He was laughing. It was a light laughter. A sound he never made at home. Then I heard her Namira. She was giggling. She sounded pampered. She sounded healthy. There was no typhoid here. I stepped closer. I leaned my ear toward the gap. Galani said, "Open wide, baby. Here comes the airplane." I felt the blood drain from my face. My fruit basket felt like a lead weight. I looked through the crack. I saw him. He was sitting on the edge of the bed. He was feeding her. She was wearing silk, not a hospital gown. She was glowing. Galani kissed her hand. He told her she was his queen. He told her he was tired of pretending with me. He called me dominant. He called me cold. He said he was diverting the funds. He said that 10,000 was just the beginning. He promised her a new life, a life bought with my hard work, a life built in my house. Then Namira spoke. She asked when he would leave me. She mentioned the baby. She mentioned the pregnancy. I felt a lightning bolt strike my spine. They were not just having an affair. They were building a family. With my money. In my city. While I worked 16 hours a day to keep the firm profitable, I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my phone. I did not burst in. I did not scream. I opened the camera. I set it to 4K. I aimed the lens through the crack in the door. I recorded everything. The kisses. The laughter. The confession of the stolen money. The secret marriage certificate they were joking about. I caught it all. I stood there, motionless. The air in the hallway was thick with the smell of lavender floor cleaner and cold iron. My thumb was pressed against the side of my phone, recording. The small red dot on the screen was the only thing alive in my world. I watched it blink once, twice. Each blink felt like a heartbeat I no longer wanted. Behind the door of room 305, my life was being rewritten. Galani's voice drifted through the crack in the door. It was warm. It was playful. It was a voice I had not heard in years. "Open wide, baby. Here comes the airplane." Then came the sound of Namira's giggle. It was high-pitched. It was pampered. It was the sound of a woman who had never known a day of true struggle. Because I had paved her way. I had paid her rent. I had bought her shoes. And now, she was eating fruit from my husband's hand. The airplane joke. It sounds so innocent, so childish. But in that moment, it was a death sentence for our marriage. Galani was a man of pride. Or so he said. He always told me he hated weak women. He told me he loved my strength. He said my ambition was my most attractive trait. But through that crack in the door, I saw the truth. He did not want a partner. He wanted a puppet. He wanted someone he could feed. Someone he could control. Someone who would look at him like he was a god. Namira sat propped up on silk pillows. The hospital room was a VIP suite. It cost $1,200 a night. My company insurance was paying for it. I watched Galani lean in. He wiped a small drip of juice from the corner of her mouth. He used his thumb. It was a gesture of extreme intimacy. A gesture he used to reserve for me. My chest felt tight, like a steel band was being crushed around my ribs. The hallway was silent. But in my head, there was a deafening roar. Namira reached out. She stroked Galani's cheek. She was not pale. She was not suffering from typhoid. Her skin was glowing. Her hair was perfectly styled, baby. When are you going to tell her? I am tired of playing the sick friend. Especially now. Our little one needs to know his father. Galani sighed. He looked down at her stomach. He placed his hand over it. Soon, I am almost there. I just need one more big transfer. Kamari is smart, but she is blinded by her own ego. She thinks I am in Charlotte. She thinks I am working for our future. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. Our little one. The words were a physical blow to my stomach. I had been trying to conceive for 3 years. Galani always told me it was the stress. He told me to work less. He told me to relax, all while he was busy planting seeds in the garden of my best friend. He was not waiting for a baby with me. He was waiting for my money to clear so he could raise a baby with her Dot. I watched him reach into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. My heart stopped. He opened it. Inside was a ring. Not just any ring. It was a Marquise-cut diamond. It looked familiar. Too familiar. It was my grandmother's ring. The one that went missing 6 months ago. The one he helped me search for until 4 in the morning. He told me I must have dropped it at the gym. He held my hand while I cried over the loss of my only family heirloom. Now he was sliding it onto Namira's finger. It fits perfectly. He whispered, "A queen deserves a crown." Namira admired the way the diamond caught the hospital light. "It is beautiful," she said. "But won't she notice?" Galani laughed. It was a dark sound. Kamari sees what I want her to see. She is so focused on the 25th floor of her office building that she cannot see what is happening in her own bed. I have been moving the Savannah Project funds for months. She thinks the costs are rising because of inflation. She does not know she is paying for our secret wedding. Secret wedding. The phrase echoed in my mind. They were already married. The betrayal was not a mistake. It was a lifestyle. For 2 years. I had been the bank. I had been the shield. I had provided the luxury they used to mock me. I looked at the marble floor beneath my feet. It was cold, unyielding, just like the rage that was starting to replace my sorrow. I thought about the mornings. I woke up early to make him breakfast. I thought about the nights I stayed up late to review his business proposals. I had built him into a director. I had given him the suits, the car, the status. I had taken a man from a bus stop and put him in a boardroom, and he had used that power to build a nest with a leech. Namira laughed again. The airplane joke. Galani made a buzzing sound with his lips. He was acting like a fool, a happy fool. He looked younger. He looked free. He looked like a man who was about to lose everything and did not even know it. I pulled the phone back slowly. The video was 8 minutes long. It was the most expensive film ever made. It had cost me 5 years of my life and millions of dollars in stolen trust. I stood up straight. I smoothed my jacket. I tucked the phone into my inner pocket. The airplane joke was over. The game had changed. Galani thought I was a naive cash cow. Namira thought I was a sister she could rob blind. They were both wrong. They had forgotten one thing about Kamari Okoro. I do not just build empires. I know exactly where the foundations are weak. I turned away from room 305. I walked toward the elevator. My heels did not make a sound on the carpeted floor. I was a ghost. I was a shadow. I was the storm they never saw coming. As the elevator doors closed, I looked at my reflection in the chrome. The woman who walked into this hospital was a wife. The woman leaving was a predator. I reached the parking lot. The Savannah heat hit me. But I was cold. I got into my Tesla. I did not start the engine immediately. I opened my laptop. I logged into the primary company's server. I saw his user ID, Galani Mabasso, Director of Operations. I hovered my cursor over the deactivate button. My finger trembled for only a second. Then I pressed it. I watched as his access to the empire vanished in a flash of white light. No more credit cards. No more company car. No more authority. He was still in room 305 playing airplane, while I was in the parking lot starting a fire. But I was not done. This was just the beginning of his deletion. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had not called in years. "Hello, Kofi. I need you to find a locksmith and a truck. We are going to Savannah, and we are going to make sure that when Namira leaves this hospital, she has nowhere to go. Evidence is the only language a court truly understands." I stood in that silent hospital hallway. My phone was a silent witness to a loud betrayal. I held the device with a grip that turned my knuckles white. The red recording light was a small, constant, violent heart. I was no longer a wife. I was a digital archivist of my own destruction. The camera lens was a 4000i. It captured every pore on Galani's lying face. It caught the shimmer of the diamond he stole from my vanity. Through the glass, I watched the two people I loved most. They were discussing my funeral while I was still breathing. The air in the hallway was thin. It tasted like cold metal and antiseptic. Every breath felt like a jagged piece of glass in my throat. I did not blink. I could not afford to miss a single second of their malice. Galani was leaning forward now. His shadow fell across Namira's silk pillows. He looked like a man who had won the lottery. But I was the one who had bought the ticket. He began to talk about the company accounts. His voice was low, methodical. It was the tone he used during our board meetings. But he was not talking about growth. He was talking about extraction. He told Namira about the fake invoices. He explained how easy it was to create a shell company for the Savannah project. He called me a workaholic. He said I was too obsessed with the 25th floor to see the basement flooding. Namira laughed. It was a sharp sound that echoed in my ears like a siren. She called me a fool. She said my kindness was a weakness she had been exploiting since Howard University. My heart did not break. It turned into a block of black ice. I zoomed in. The 4K resolution was terrifyingly clear. I saw the marriage certificate on the bedside table. I saw the names. Galani Mabasso and Namira Vance. Dated 2 years ago. 2 years. My mind raced back through the calendar. 2 years of anniversary dinners. 2 years of I love you texts. 2 years of me paying for Namira's luxury townhouse. They had been playing house on my dime while I was working 16-hour days to build their future. The betrayal was not a moment. It was a mountain. Galani reached for the certificate. He kissed it. He said it was their golden ticket. He told Namira that as soon as the next transfer cleared, they would be gone. He planned to leave me with the debt and the lawsuits. He had been overcharging for materials. He had been ghosting our regular vendors. He was not just cheating on me. He was trying to dismantle my legacy. He wanted to watch me burn so he could warm his hands by the fire. I felt a drop of sweat run down my spine. The hallway was freezing, but my skin was on fire. I watched Namira stroke the diamond on her finger. My grandmother's ring. The one I had cried over for weeks. She called it a trophy. She said it looked better on her young hand than on my tired one. Galani laughed. He promised her a mansion in Savannah, a place where they could raise their child far away from my dominant energy. Every word they spoke was a nail in the coffin of my mercy. I captured it all. The dates, the amounts, the specific names of the fake vendors. Galani was so arrogant. He thought the hallway was empty. He thought I was safely tucked away in my Buckhead office. He did not know that the woman he was mocking was standing 5 steps away. Recording his downfall in high definition, I felt the weight of the fruit basket in my other hand. It felt like a joke, a symbol of the woman I used to be, the woman who brought gifts to her enemies, the woman who believed in friendship. I wanted to throw it through the door. I wanted to scream until the hospital walls shook. But I stayed silent. A predator does not growl before the kill. I was gathering the ammunition I needed for a total war. Galani began to talk about the final move. He said he would ask me for a divorce in a few months, but only after he had drained the last of the operational capital. He wanted to make sure I had nothing left to fight with. He wanted me broken. He wanted me begging. He told Namira that I was nothing without my money. He called me a puppet of my father's name. Asterisk, I watched his eyes. They were full of greed. He did not love Namira. He loved the lifestyle I provided. And Namira did not love him. She loved the power she felt by stealing from me. They were two parasites feeding on the same host. But they forgot one thing. A host can choose to stop feeding the leeches. I looked at the red dot on my screen. 5 minutes of footage. 5 minutes of truth. I had enough to ruin him. I had enough to send him to prison for a decade. I had enough to make sure Namira never worked in this city again. I felt a strange sense of calm. The sorrow was gone. The confusion had vanished. There was only the cold, hard digital reality. I slowly pulled the phone back. I checked the file. It was saved to the cloud. It was backed up on 3 different servers. I had the 4K confession. I had the parasites plan. I took a deep breath. The hospital's smell no longer bothered me. I felt like I was breathing the air of a new world. A world where I was no longer a victim. I turned away from the door. I did not look back. I walked down the carpeted hallway with the grace of a queen going to war. My heels made no sound. I was a ghost in their machine. I reached the elevator and pressed the button. As the doors slid open, I looked at the fruit basket in my hand. I walked to the trash can near the nurse's station. I dropped the basket inside. The sound of the fruit hitting the bottom was the sound of my old life ending. I did not need cover stories anymore. I did not need to be kind. I walked into the elevator and watched the doors close. The reflection in the mirror was different now. The eyes were sharper. The jaw was set. I pulled out my phone one last time. I sent a single text to Kofi. The message was simple. Start the engine. We are going to Savannah. The recording was done. The trap was set. Now it was time to watch the parasites starve. I stepped into the master bedroom of the Savannah house. The air was heavy. It carried a familiar scent. Joe Malone, English pear, and freesia. It was my signature fragrance. My favorite. But I had not sprayed it here. Namira was not just stealing my husband. She was trying to wear my soul. The room was a mess of luxury and chaos. Expensive silk sheets were bunched up on the floor. Half-empty wine glasses sat on the nightstands. It smelled like a celebration built on a grave. My grave. I walked toward the large teak wardrobe. It stood against the wall like a monument to their greed. I yanked the doors open. The hinges groaned in the silence. My breath caught in my throat. Rows of designer handbags stared back at me. A Hermes Birkin in sunset orange. A Chanel classic flap in quilted lambskin. A Louis Vuitton Neverfull. These were not just bags. They were mid-sized cars sitting on a shelf. My eyes landed on a gray Dior saddlebag. It was tucked in the corner. I reached out and touched the leather. My fingers trembled. I knew this bag. I had bought it in Paris 3 years ago. It had gone missing from my Buckhead estate last month. Galani told me the housekeepers must have misplaced it. He spent an hour pretending to look through the storage bins with me. He even suggested we fire the cleaning staff. He didn't fire them. He just moved the bag here. I pulled it out. It was heavy. I opened the clasp. Inside was a receipt for a private ultrasound, dated 2 weeks ago. I dropped the bag. It hit the floor with a dull thud. The betrayal was not a ghost anymore. It was a physical object. It was a wardrobe full of my stolen life. Namira had been living in my house, wearing my clothes, using my accessories. She was a shadow living in the light I provided. I felt a surge of nausea. The walls of the room felt like they were closing in. I turned toward the vanity table. It was covered in high-end cosmetics, gold tubes of lipstick, crystal bottles of serum. All of it was top tier. All of it was bought with the Savannah Project funds. Then I saw it. A small velvet jewelry box. It sat near the edge of the mirror. It was old. The fabric was worn at the corners. My heart stopped. I recognized that box. It belonged to my grandmother. It was supposed to be in my walls, safe in Atlanta. I picked it up. My hands were ice cold. I opened the lid slowly. The velvet inside was stained with time. And there it was. My grandmother's ring. The Marquise cut diamond. It sparkled under the bedroom lights with a cruel brilliance. This was not just jewelry. It was my heritage. It was the only thing I had left of the woman who raised me. 6 months ago, Galani held me while I sobbed. I told him the ring had vanished. I thought I had lost it at the gym. I felt like I had failed my family. He looked me in the eyes that night. He told me it was just an object. He told me he would buy me a bigger one, a better one. He helped me file the insurance claim. He watched me sign the papers while I wiped away my tears. But he hadn't lost it. He had stolen it from my finger while I slept. He had taken a piece of my history and handed it to a parasite. I pulled the ring out of the box. I held it up to the light. I could see the tiny scratches on the band. I knew every detail of this diamond. I looked at the vanity mirror. I saw a woman I didn't recognize. My face was a mask of cold fury. I wasn't just a cheated wife. I was a victim of a coordinated heist. Galani was not just a traitor. He was a thief. He was a criminal. He had systematically stripped my life of its value to build a kingdom for Namira. I thought about the hours I spent working, the meetings I sat through, the stress I endured to build Okoro Global. Every dollar I earned was being filtered into this room. I felt the weight of the ring in my palm. It felt like a weapon. I realized that Galani didn't love Namira. He loved the power of giving her my things. He felt like a king because he was handing out my treasures. And Namira, she was a vulture. She didn't want a husband. She wanted a lifestyle she didn't have to earn. She was wearing my grandmother's ring on her finger while she planned my downfall. I looked back at the wardrobe. I wanted to burn it all. I wanted to see the silk and the leather turn to ash. But I breathed slowly, deeply. A CEO does not destroy assets. She recovers them. I reached for my briefcase. I began to empty the wardrobe. I took the Birkin. I took the Chanel. I took the Dior. I took every single item that belonged to me. I stripped the room of its stolen glory. Then I saw a small safe hidden in the bottom of the closet. A digital safe. It was covered by a pile of cashmere sweaters. My sweaters. I knelt on the floor. The carpet felt rough against my knees. I stared at the keypad. Galani thought he was clever, but he was predictable. I tried our anniversary error. I tried his birthday error. Then I remembered the date he got that strange tattoo on his wrist. The one he said was just art. I entered the 6 digits. Click. The door swung open. I didn't find money. I found documents. A secret marriage certificate, dated 2 years ago, and a black ledger. I opened the ledger. It was filled with Galani's neat handwriting. He had documented every cent he stole, every fake invoice, every boutique purchase. He was a meticulous criminal. He had kept a record of my ruin. I found the entry for the ring. Sold to Namira for $0. Condition, my queen's crown. I felt a cold laughter bubble up in my chest. It was the sound of a woman who had finally seen the bottom of the pit. I took the ledger. I took the certificate. I took the ring. I stood up and looked around the empty room. The Joe Malone scent was fading. The silence was returning. I walked out of the master bedroom. I didn't look back. I headed for the stairs. Kofi was waiting in the living room with the moving team. I looked at him. My eyes were like flint. Empty it, he said. Every chair, every table, every disgusting photo on the wall. I want this house to be a hollow shell. Kofi nodded. He saw the ring in my hand. He knew the war had reached a new level. I walked out onto the front porch. The Savannah sun was starting to set. The sky was a bruised purple. I looked at the ring one last time before tucking it safely into my pocket. It was back where it belonged. But the man who took it, he was about to find out what happens when you steal from a woman who has nothing left to lose but her mercy. I got into my Tesla and closed the door. The silence was absolute. I looked at the house. My house. Tomorrow, Galani would return here with his mistress. They would expect silk and designer bags. They would expect the comfort of my stolen life. But they would find only bare walls and the ghost of their greed. Shame is a very loud neighbor. It does not ask for permission to enter. It simply takes over the entire street. I stood on the manicured lawn of the Savannah house. The humidity was thick. It felt like a wet blanket against my skin. The smell of freshly cut grass mixed with the scent of old wood and betrayal. Behind me, the sound of heavy boots echoed on the porch. Kofi and his team were moving fast. They were not movers. They were liquidators. They were erasing a lie, one piece of furniture at a time. I watched a large black SUV pull up to the curb. 2 security guards stepped out. They wore tight black uniforms. They did not smile. They stood at the entrance of the gate like stone statues. I crossed my arms. The silk of my suit felt cool, but my blood was boiling. I looked at the house. This was their love nest, their secret sanctuary. They thought these walls would protect them. They thought I would never find this place. They were wrong today. This house becomes a theater, and the entire neighborhood is invited to the show. I turned to the locksmith. He was working on the front door. The sound of the drill was sharp. It pierced the quiet of the elite neighborhood. I saw a curtain twitch in the house next door. An elderly woman was peeking out. I did not hide. I looked directly at her and nodded. I wanted them to watch. I wanted them to see the trash I was about to put on the curb. The lock clicked. The door swung open. A rush of cold air hit me. It smelled like Namira's perfume. It made my stomach turn. Empty, I said. My voice was low, but it carried the weight of a hammer. I want everything out. Every chair they sat in. Every bed they slept in. Every disgusting memory they built here. Take it all. Kofi signaled to the men. They began to march inside. They did not use bubble wrap. They did not use care. They grabbed the velvet sofa, the one Galani told me he was buying for his office. He had used my corporate card for it. They dragged it across the mahogany floor. It made a screaming sound. I liked it. I stood in the center of the yard. I watched the first pile begin to grow. A mountain of clothes. Silk robes. Designer shoes. Most of them still had the tags on. All bought with the Savannah Project funds. The neighbors began to gather on the sidewalk. They whispered. They pointed. I saw a young couple walking their dog. They stopped. They looked at the pile of luxury trash. This is the circus I promised. A display of greed and deception. Kofi walked out holding a massive gold frame. It was the photograph from Paris, Galani and Namira, embracing in front of the Eiffel Tower. They looked so happy, so perfect. It was a masterpiece of theater. I walked toward it. The glass reflected the afternoon sun. It blinded me for a second. I reached for a heavy brass vase sitting on the porch. I did not hesitate. I swung it with all my strength. The sound of the glass shattering was the most beautiful music I had heard in years. It sounded like justice. The shards flew in every direction. Some of them landed on my shoes. I looked at their torn faces in the photo. Their smiles were now jagged lines. I told Kofi. He nodded and threw the frame onto the pile of clothes. The neighbors gasped. I could feel their eyes on me. They saw the woman in the white suit, the woman who was systematically destroying a home. They did not know I was just recovering my property. The movers brought out the sports motorcycle next. The one Galani said he sold a year ago. It was polished, shiny, A toy for a boy who forgot who bought his batteries. They pushed it into the center of the lawn. It looked ridiculous sitting there next to a pile of dirty laundry. I saw the neighborhood security guard approaching. He looked confused. He looked nervous. He saw the guards in black. He saw the locksmith. He saw me. "Excuse me, ma'am?" He started. I took off my sunglasses. I looked him in the eyes. "I am Kamari Okoro. I am the legal owner of this property. Everything you see on this lawn is garbage. If you want to call the police, call them. My legal team is already on the way with the deed." The guard blinked. He recognized the name. The Okoro family owned half the commercial real estate in this district. He backed away. He did not say another word. He just watched like everyone else. The circus was in full swing now. The lawn was covered. Kitchen chairs. A dining table. Boxes of expensive wine. It looked like a luxury yard sale. But nothing was for sale. It was all for show. I walked to the back of the truck. I pulled out a large red sign. It was professionally printed. I had prepared it before leaving Atlanta. I hammered the stake into the soft earth near the gate. The sign read, "Private property under surveillance of the owner. Kamari Okoro, entry forbidden to unauthorized persons, especially mistresses." I heard a woman on the sidewalk let out a small laugh. The word was out. The secret was dead. Namira Vance was no longer the mysterious new neighbor. She was the woman who lost her clothes to the rightful wife. I felt a strange sense of peace. The rage was still there, but it was organized. I looked at the pile of trash one last time. I saw a Dior bag peeking out from under a chair. The gray one. The one Galani stole from my closet. I walked over and picked it up. I didn't say a word. I just tucked it under my arm. It was mine. Everything else was a lie. I checked my watch. 6 p.m. Galani would be getting a notification soon. Not from the hospital, but from the bank. His world was shrinking, and the house he thought was his castle was now a public museum of his shame. I signaled to my team. "We are done here," I said. Kofi locked the gate with a heavy iron chain. He looped it twice. It looked like a prison door. I got into my Tesla. The neighbors were still there. They were taking photos. They were recording videos. Good. Let it go viral. Let the world see what happens when you try to build a life on a foundation of theft. I started the engine. The car hummed. I looked at the house in the rearview mirror. It was empty. Dark. A hollow shell of a betrayal. As I drove away, I felt my phone buzz. A notification of a failed transaction at the hospital. $1,500. Declined. Galani was trying to pay for something. Maybe medicine. Maybe a gift. But his cards were dead. His access was gone. He was trapped in a luxury hospital with a pregnant mistress and a zero balance. The circus was moving to a new location, and I had the best seat in the house. Status is a fragile illusion. It depends entirely on the numbers in a bank account. Numbers that I had just deleted. Galani stood at the administration desk of St. Jude's Hospital. He was still wearing his designer silk shirt. It was wrinkled now. It was stained with the sweat of a man who realized his golden cage was open. The air in the lobby was cold. It smelled like expensive floor wax and sharp antiseptic. Galani reached into his leather wallet. He pulled out the black card, the one I had gifted him on our 3rd anniversary. He laid it on the marble counter with a flick of his wrist. He still had the arrogance of a millionaire. He still thought the world would bow to his signature. The receptionist took the card. She swiped it. The machine made a soft, high-pitched beep. She frowned. She tried again. Beep! Galani tapped his fingers on the marble. The sound was like a ticking clock. A clock he did not know had already stopped. "I am sorry, sir," the woman said. Her voice was flat, professional. "This card has been declined by the issuer." Galani laughed. It was a hollow sound. "That is impossible," said. "Check the machine. It is a priority account. There are no limits on that card." The receptionist did not blink. She had seen this drama before. She swiped a second card. The gold one from our joint account, beep, declined. Insufficient funds? The silence that followed was heavy. It was a physical weight on Galani's shoulders. He could feel the eyes of the other patients in the waiting room. He was a director. He was a king. Now he was just a man with a piece of useless plastic. His face began to turn a deep, violent red. He grabbed the cards. His hands were shaking. He stepped away from the desk. He retreated to a corner. He pulled out his phone. He opened the banking app. I watched him through the server logs. I saw his user ID try to log in 6 times. Each time, the system rejected him. Access denied. Account frozen. He was breathing hard. The sound was loud in the quiet hallway. He looked at the Rolex on his wrist. A Submariner, $12,000. It felt heavy now, like a shackle. He walked back to room 305. Namira was waiting. She was sitting up in her silk pajamas. She wanted gourmet waffles. She wanted fresh strawberries. She wanted the luxury I had always provided. Galani did not tell her the truth. He told her the bank system was down. He told her it was a national glitch. He was still protecting his ego. Even as the floor was vanishing beneath him, the Savannah heat was brutal. Galani walked out of the hospital at noon. He did not have his car. The Escalade was already being towed back to Atlanta. He had to walk. The sun was a white disk in the sky. It baked the asphalt. The air smelled like exhaust and hot tar. His silk shirt was now soaked. It clung to his back like a second skin. He found a small, dark shop on a side street. The sign said Golden Watches. It was a place for desperate people. The air inside was stagnant. It smelled like old coins and regret. A middle-aged man with thick glasses sat behind a cage of bulletproof glass. Galani took off the Rolex. He laid it on the velvet tray. "I want to sell this," he said. His voice was hoarse. He was no longer shouting. The man took a magnifying glass. He looked at the movement. He checked the serial number. "It is authentic." The man said, "But I do not see the box. I do not see the papers." Galani wiped sweat from his eyes. "I do not have them with me. I am on a business trip. I need the cash now." The man smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Without the papers. This watch is a liability. It could be stolen. I can only offer you $1,000. Galani's heart stopped. 1,000. He gasped. "This watch is worth 10 times that." The jeweler shrugged. "To a collector with papers, yes. To me, today it is just metal and parts. Take it or leave it." Galani looked at the door. He looked at his reflection in the glass. He looked like a beggar. He thought about the $3,000 deposit the hospital wanted. He thought about Namira's medicine. He thought about the empty house he was about to return to. He leaned toward the glass. "Please," he whispered. "I am a businessman. I have a firm in Atlanta. I just need a little more. Give me 3,000. I will come back for the watch next week." The jeweler did not move. 1,000 cash. "That is my final offer." Galani felt the last of his pride crumble. He was a man who once spent $1,000 on a single bottle of wine. Now he was begging for that same amount to survive the night. He nodded. His head felt like it weighed 100 pounds. "Fine, give it to me." He watched as the man counted out the wrinkled bills. 10 20s, 5 50s, a stack of hundreds. It looked like a pittance. Galani snatched the money. He walked out into the heat. He felt light. His wrist was empty. The symbol of his status was gone. He was a millionaire with $1,000 in his pocket and no way home. He walked to a nearby pharmacy. He bought Namira's medicine. He bought a cheap sandwich. He sat on a park bench and ate. The bread was dry. The meat was salty. It was the taste of his new reality. He looked at his phone. He had a message from me. A calm, loving message. Asking how the meeting in Charlotte was going. Asking if he needed anything. I was playing with my prey. I wanted him to feel the contrast. I wanted him to know that the woman he was betraying was the only person who could save him. He did not reply. He could not. He went back to the hospital. He paid the $300 deposit for the day. He walked into room 305. Namira looked at his empty hands. "Where are my waffles?" She snapped. Galani sat in the plastic chair. The place was closed. He lied. Namira rolled her eyes. "You are useless," she said. "You said you were rich. You said we would never want for anything." Galani did not answer. He looked at the white walls of the hospital. He realized that the woman in the bed did not love him. She loved the watch, and the watch was gone. He pulled out his phone again. He checked the Savannah neighborhood WhatsApp group. He saw a video of a truck clearing out a house, a video of a pile of designer clothes on a lawn. He saw a red sign, "Private Property." Kamari Okoro, the sandwich he had just eaten, turned to leap in his stomach. He realized I was not in Atlanta. I was in Savannah. I was behind him. I was everywhere. He felt a cold chill in the humid room. He looked at Namira. He looked at his empty wrist. He realized the game of airplane was over. The crash had begun. And there were no parachutes. The lobby of Okoro Global is a temple of glass and steel. It is a place where millions are made with a single handshake. On Monday morning, the air was pressurized. It smelled of expensive Arabica coffee and white lilies. The marble floor was polished to a mirror shine. It reflected the faces of the 200 employees beginning their week. But today, the mirror was about to crack. I stood on the balcony of the mezzanine. I looked down at the entrance. My white suit was impeccable. It felt like armor. My hair was pulled back into a tight, professional bun. I was the image of absolute control. Below me, the heavy glass doors slid open. Galani entered. He did not walk. He stumbled. He was wearing the same silk shirt from Savannah. It was wrinkled. It was stained with the sweat of his own desperation. He looked like a man who had been dragged through the dirt. But he still tried to hold his chin up. He still had the ghost of his former arrogance. He walked toward the high-tech turnstiles. He pulled out his executive access card. He swiped it with a trembling hand. Beep! The light turned red. Access denied. He tried again. Beep! Red. He hit the plastic with his palm. The sound echoed in the silent lobby. A security guard approached. He was a large man. He had been on my payroll for 10 years. "Mr. Mabasso," the guard said. His voice was a low rumble. "Your card is no longer active." Galani's face turned a violent shade of purple. He grabbed the guard's lapel. "Do you know who I am?" he shouted. His voice was ragged. "I am the director of operations. I am the husband of the CEO. Open this gate right now." The lobby went silent. 200 employees stopped. They turned. They watched. The man who had once fired people for being 5 minutes late was now screaming at a turnstile. I decided it was time for the Queen to descend. I walked toward the VIP elevator. My heels made a sharp, rhythmic sound on the marble. Click, clack, click, clack. It was the sound of a countdown. The elevator doors slid open in the lobby. I stepped out. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. I did not look at them. I kept my eyes on Galani. He saw me. His eyes widened. He let go of the guard. "Kamari," he gasped. "Baby, tell them. There is a mistake with the system. I cannot get in." He tried to smile. It was a pathetic sight. I stopped 10 feet away from him. I did not cross my arms. I kept them at my sides. I was a pillar of cold authority. "There is no mistake, Galani," I said. My voice was calm. It was quiet. But in that silent lobby, it sounded like a thunderclap. Every employee leaned in. They did not want to miss a single word of the execution. Galani took a step forward. He reached for the glass barrier. "Kamari, let's go to our office. We can talk about Savannah. We can talk about the bank. Don't do this here, our office." I repeated. I let out a small, cynical laugh. "That office was cleared out at 4 this morning. Your nameplate is currently in a dumpster in the alley. You are no longer an employee of Okoro Global. and you are certainly no longer my husband." A collective gasp moved through the room. It was the sound of 200 people realizing the king had been dethroned. Galani's hands began to shake violently. "You cannot do this," he hissed. "I have shares. I have a contract." I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out a brown leather folder. I did not hand it to him. I opened it. I turned it around so the entire lobby could see the contents. I held up a photo. It was a 4,000 image from the hospital. Galani feeding Namira. The airplane joke captured in a single. Shaming moment. One held up the secret marriage certificate. I held up the bank statements showing the $10,000 mistake. "You committed a felony, Galani," I said. I projected my voice to the back of the room. "You embezzled $200,000 over 2 years. You used company funds to buy a mistress a life you could not afford. You stole a family heirloom from my own finger. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a crime." Galani looked at the faces of his colleagues. He saw their disgust. He saw their pity. He saw the people he had bullied looking at him like he was a common thief. I dropped the folder. The papers scattered across the marble floor. They landed at his feet like white leaves. "These are the documents for your immediate termination for cause," I said, "and this." I pulled a blue envelope from my pocket. "This is the divorce petition. You have been served. In front of your peers, in the house I built." Galani looked at the blue envelope. He did not pick it up. He looked at me. His eyes were full of hate. "You think you're so smart," he shouted. "You're just a cold, bitter woman. Nobody loves you. They just fear your checkbook." I smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had already won. Fear is a reliable business tool, Galani. Love, on the other hand, is just something you use to steal diamonds. I looked at the security team. "Escort this man out of my building. If he ever sets foot on this property again, have him arrested for trespassing." The guards stepped forward. They grabbed Galani by his wrinkled arms. He tried to struggle. He tried to scream. But they were stronger. "Wait," I said. The guards stopped. The lobby held its breath. I walked toward Galani. I stood inches away from his face. I could smell the stale hospital air on him. I reached into my pocket and pulled out his car keys. The keys to the Cadillac Escalade. I dropped them into a nearby trash can. The metal hit the plastic with a hollow thud. "You're walking today, Galani," I said. "I hope your shoes are comfortable. It is a long way to the Alley of Lost Souls." I turned my back on him. I walked toward the elevator. I did not look back as the guards dragged him through the glass doors. I did not listen to his pathetic shouts. I reached the elevator and pressed the button for the 25th floor. As the doors closed, I looked at the 200 employees. They were still standing there, frozen. "Get back to work." I said, "We have an empire to run." The elevator began to rise. I felt the pressure change in my ears. I was alone. I was the CEO. I was the woman who had just executed a parasite in the light of day. But as I watched the floor numbers climb, I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my chest. It was not sorrow. It was the realization that the war was not over. Galani had nothing left. And a man with nothing is the most dangerous animal in the world. Luxury is a memory that burns. Yesterday, Galani was a king in a buckhead mansion. Today, he is a ghost in an alleyway that God forgot. The transition from power to poverty is not a slope. It is a cliff. Galani stood on the sidewalk of Midtown Atlanta. The heat was a physical weight. The pavement radiated a dry, dusty warmth. He looked at the 2 suitcases sitting in the gutter. They were expensive leather, but they were sitting next to a pile of trash. He had no car. He had no keys. He had no pride left. Behind him, the glass tower of Okoro Global stood like a silent judge. He could feel my eyes watching him from the 25th floor. He did not know that I was already mapping his every step. Asterisk Namira stood beside him. She was clutching her stomach. Her designer dress was wrinkled. Her expensive makeup was smudged with dried tears. "Where are we going, Galani?" she whispered. Her voice was thin. It was weak. Galani did not answer. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out the wrinkled bills from the watch sale. He had less than $900. That was the price of his entire life. He signaled for a taxi. Not a luxury black car, a dented, yellow sedan that smelled of old tobacco and cheap air freshener. Drive to Buckhead, Galani ordered. He tried to use his director voice, but it cracked. The driver did not look at him. He just pulled into the heavy traffic. The ride was silent. Galani looked out the window at the city he used to own. He saw the high-end boutiques where he used to spend my money. He saw the restaurants where the staff used to bow to him. Now, he was just a passenger in a noisy car. The air conditioning was broken. The humidity was stifling. It felt like the city was closing in on them. They arrived at the gates of our estate. The 10-foot iron bars were closed. A heavy black chain was looped around the handles. It looked like a prison. Galani jumped out of the taxi. He ran to the security booth. "Open the gate," he shouted. He hit the glass with his fist. The sound was flat, empty. A guard stepped out. He was not the usual elderly man. He was a mountain of a man in a black tactical vest. "Mr. Mabasso," the guard said. His voice was like grinding stones. "You are not permitted on this property. This is my house." Galani screamed. His face was turning a dangerous shade of red. "My wife is inside. Let me in." The guard did not move. He handed Galani two large, black plastic bags. "These are your personal effects." The guard said, "Work clothes, underwear, everything else belongs to the estate." Galani looked at the trash bags. He looked at the gate. He saw a neighbor's car slow down. He saw the flash of a cell phone camera. The news was spreading. The king was a beggar. Namira stayed in the taxi. She hid her face behind her hair. She could not bear the shame. Galani dragged the trash bags to the car. He threw them in the trunk. The taxi driver grunted in annoyance. "Where to now?" the driver asked. Galani sat in the back seat. His head was in his hands. He gave an address in a part of town he used to avoid, a place where the streetlights are always broken. The taxi moved away from the green trees of Buckhead. It moved toward the concrete jungle of the south side. They reached the entrance of a narrow alley. The sign was rusted. It hung by a single nail. "Alley of Lost Souls." The taxi stopped. The driver refused to go any further. The alley was too narrow. It was filled with potholes and stagnant water. Galani and Namira stepped out. The air here was different. It did not smell of white lilies and fresh rain. It smelled of stale grease, overflowing trash bins, and the heavy scent of poverty. Namira's heels snapped on the uneven stones. The sound was like a bone breaking in the silence. She began to cry. A soft, pathetic whimpering. Galani did not comfort her. He was busy dragging 4 bags through the dirt. They reached a 2-story building. The paint was peeling like dead skin. The windows were covered in iron bars. A plywood sign was nailed to the door. Walker's rooms, $300 a month. Couples accepted. Galani knocked. The sound was muffled by the heavy, humid air. A woman opened the door. Mrs. Walker. She had rollers in her hair. She had a cigarette dangling from her lip. "You the ones who called?" she asked. She looked them up and down. She saw the designer clothes. She saw the desperation. Galani nodded. He handed her $400. $300 for the rent. $100 for the deposit. It was the last of his watch money. "Follow me," she said. They climbed a narrow, creaking staircase. The wood groaned under their feet. The hallway was dark. A single bulb flickered overhead. It cast long, dancing shadows on the stained wallpaper. They reached the back of the building. Room for B. Mrs. Walker opened the door with a heavy iron key. The room was a 10 by 10 square. It was a rat hole. The walls were faded, sickly blue. A single, thin foam mattress sat on the floor. There was no bed frame. There were no silk sheets, just a gray blanket that looked like it had been washed 1,000 times. A plastic wardrobe sat in the corner. Its door was crooked. A small metal fan hummed on a wooden crate. It did not move the air. It just vibrated with a low, irritating buzz. "This is it," Mrs. Walker said. "Shared bathroom is at the end of the hall. Don't leave your trash in the corridor." She took the money and left. The sound of her footsteps fading was the sound of their final hope dying. Namira walked to the center of the room. She looked at the thin mattress. She looked at the brown water stain on the ceiling. It was shaped like a giant, mocking tear. She collapsed onto the foam. It made a wheezing sound. "I can't stay here, Galani," she sobbed. "It smells like damp. It smells like old people. My skin is going to break out." Galani sat on one of the trash bags. He did not look at her. He looked at the flickering light bulb. "This is our reality, Namira," he said. His voice was hollow. It was the voice of a man who had finally realized the depth of the pit he had dug. "We have no car. We have no jobs. We have $40 left." The first night was a symphony of misery. The neighbors were loud. A woman was screaming at her husband next door. A dog was barking in the alley. The walls were so thin Galani could hear the man in 4C coughing. It was a wet, heavy cough. The heat in the room was suffocating. The small fan was useless. Galani lay on the hard floor. His back ached. He thought about the king-size bed in Buckhead. He thought about the soft, cool breeze of the central air conditioning. Namira was restless. She kept scratching her arms. The mattress was infested with things that bite in the dark. Every time she moved, the foam squeaked. At midnight, a heavy rain began to fall. It drummed on the tin roof with a deafening roar. The water stain on the ceiling began to drip. 1 drop, 2 drops. It landed right on Namira's forehead. She let out a scream that was muffled by the thunder. She jumped up. Her silk pajamas were stained with dirty water. "Do something, Galani," she shrieked. Galani stood up. He looked at the dripping ceiling. He had no tools. He had no ladder. He had nothing. He placed a plastic bucket under the drip. The sound of the water hitting the plastic was a rhythmic, torturous beat. Plink, plink, plink. It was the sound of his new life. He walked to the window. He looked out through the iron bars. The alley was a river of mud. He saw his reflection in the dark glass. He saw a man who had traded an empire for a mistress and a $300 rat hole. He felt a sudden, sharp pang of hunger. He had not eaten since the sandwich in the park, but he was afraid to spend the last $40 suddenly. There was a knock on the door. A soft, polite knock. Galani froze. Who could it be? He walked to the door and opened it. No one was there, but hanging on the handle was a small paper bag. It was a delivery. Galani took it inside. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a bowl of watery broth. No meat, no bread. Just a few limp greens floating in a salty liquid. There was a note inside. It was written in neat, elegant handwriting. "Welcome home, Galani. I hope the soup is to your liking. It is the same one you suggested for the homeless shelter last year. Remember, you said it was more than they deserved. Enjoy your meal." Galani crushed the note in his fist. He looked at the watery soup. He looked at Namira, who was now crying in the corner. He realized that I was not just watching, I was participating. I was the architect of this misery. And I was just getting started. He realized that the Alley of Lost Souls was not a destination. It was a waiting room for a hell he had never imagined. Victory is a cold perfume. It smells like crisp $100 bills and silence. I sat in the visitation booth of the Fulton County Jail. The air was thick. It smelled of industrial bleach and unwashed bodies. A heavy, yellowed light buzzed overhead. It was a rhythmic sound. A hum of misery. I wore my charcoal gray suit. It was hand-tailored. It cost more than Galani's new neighbors would make in a decade. I looked at the thick glass partition. It was scratched. It was stained with the greasy fingerprints of thousands of desperate people. My hands were gloved. I did not want to touch anything in this place. I did not want the filth of his new life to rub off on me. The heavy steel door at the back of the room groaned open. The sound was a harsh, metallic scream. I did not move. I did not flinch. I watched as a guard led him in. Galani, the man who once occupied my bed and my boardroom. He was unrecognizable. The orange jumpsuit was 2 sizes too big. It hung off his skeletal frame like a circus tent. His hair was no longer styled. It was matted, greasy. His skin was the color of old parchment. He walked with a limp, a reminder of his night on the asphalt during the robbery. He sat down on the metal stool. The sound of the chains around his ankles was the only music in the room. He looked at me through the glass. His eyes were wide. They were bloodshot. They were full of a terrifying hope. He reached for the phone. His hand was trembling. I waited. I let him wait. I wanted him to feel the distance between our worlds. Finally, I picked up my receiver. My hand was steady. My pulse was slow. Kamari. He whispered. His voice was a rasping ghost of its former self. You came. I knew you would. You still love me? I can see it. Please. Talk to the DA. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I was out of my mind. I can't stay here. The men, the cells. It is a nightmare, Kamari. Help me. I looked at him. I did not blink. I did not show him a single ounce of pity. Pity is for people who made a mistake. Galani was a plan. He was a project of deception. I am not here to help you, Galani, I said. My voice was a blade of ice. It cut through the static of the phone line. I am here to witness the finality of your choices. I wanted to see you in this color. It suits your character. Orange, the color of a sunset on a ruined life. Galani leaned his head against the glass. He left a smudge of sweat on the surface. Don't be like this. I did it for the baby. Namira was bleeding. I was desperate. You know me. I am a good man. I let out a soft, sharp laugh. A good man. You are a thief. You are an embezzler. You are a man who sold his grandmother's legacy for a mistress who has already forgotten your name. Namira left the hospital. She is gone. She is a shadow in the streets now. Her face is a map of her own greed. She didn't ask about you. She didn't ask where they were taking you. She just asked if there was any money left in your wallet. There wasn't. Galani's eyes filled with tears. They ran down his face and disappeared into his beard. He looked like a broken child. Not a director. Not a king. Not a husband. I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out a stack of documents. I pressed them against the glass. This is the final decree. The divorce is absolute. The judge signed it an hour ago. You are officially nothing to me. No name, no connection, no legacy. But that is not all, said. I watched him scan the pages. His eyes moved frantically. What is this? He asked. This, I replied, is a civil suit for the recovery of $200,000, plus interest, plus legal fees. Every cent you spent on Namira, every boutique, every meal, every night in that Savannah rat hole. It is now a debt you owe to Okoro Global. Since you have no assets, the court has ordered a lien on any future earnings you might have. Not that there will be many. You're destroying me. He moaned. I am already in prison. What more do you want? I leaned in closer to the glass. I wanted him to see the lack of mercy in my eyes. I want you to remember me every time you eat a piece of stale bread. I want you to see my face every time you look at the bars. I want you to know that while you are scrubbing floors for $1 a day, I am building a skyscraper. I am the woman who built you, and I am the woman who deleted you. I stood up. I hung up the phone. I did not wait for his reply. I did not want to hear his begging. The sound of his fist hitting the glass was a dull, pathetic thud. I walked toward the exit. The guard opened the door for me. He nodded with respect. He knew who I was. The world knows who I am. I walked out into the crisp, clean air of the Atlanta afternoon. The sun was shining. The city was humming with life. My Mercedes was waiting at the curb. Kofi stood by the door. He held it open for me. "Is it done, ma'am?" he asked. "It is done," I said. I got into the back seat. The leather was soft. The interior smelled of expensive cedar and victory. I looked out the window as we drove away. I saw the high walls of the prison disappearing in the rearview mirror. I pulled out my phone. I saw a news notification. Okoro global stocks were up 5%. The board was happy. The firm was stable. I was free. I felt a sudden, immense sense of lightness. The weight of 5 years of lies was gone. The shadow of Galani was erased. I was a CEO. I was a woman. I was a matriarch of my own destiny. We drove past a bus stop. I saw a woman sitting there. She was wearing a tattered coat. Her face was covered by a hood, but I saw the scars on her cheek. Namira, she was staring at nothing, holding a cardboard sign. I did not tell Kofi to stop. I did not feel an urge to help. I just looked at her, and then I looked away. Some people are meant to be warnings, not stories. I closed my eyes. The hum of the engine was a lullaby. I thought about my grandmother. I thought about the ring in my pocket. I would have it cleaned. I would wear it again, not as a memory of a husband, but as a symbol of the strength he could not break. The checkmate was complete. The king was in a cell. The pawn was in the gutter. And the queen. The queen was going home.